state plans, plan unit development, new communities. It was always something interesting. And I was there for about 15 years. Until we got the same thing when we got a cut from the governor decided he was going to abolish our division, because of the budgetary reasons. And it was a great division. A lot of things came out of it. Some of the brightest, funniest people I've ever met in my life I worked with.
Good work. They were doing work.
We did state plans, and the state plans were amazing. And the politicians, you have New Jersey is 567 odd municipalities. All right, so home rule is a big thing. You come up with a state plan, you take the state plan and you put it on a shelf, because that's where it stays.
Right.
There's no one to deal with it. Anyhow, that was part of my career. At one point, someone from a whole different background, it was healthcare, he said, you work for the government, why don't you, I want to take an application through for a nursing home, right? And I said, I never did that. He says, well, you could do it. You have to fill out these applications at the Department of Health. I was totally innocent. I said, yeah, sure, why not? I went to the Department of Health, and I talked, and they said, there's no real need in your county for a nurse, but we have a need for an alcohol rehabilitation facility. I said, okay, whatever. I had a background. I had someone who really wanted the application done, had money, wanted to build it, had land in Burlington County. So they said, there's a series of meetings that you have to attend, and you have to present your application. I said, well, I'm thinking to myself that I'd be sitting similar to something like this, talking about the application. When I got there was probably a room of maybe 60 or 70 people screaming at me because I had no background in alcohol rehabilitation. And I was proposing to do something that was their bailiwick, it was their field. I was terrified. I mean, really, I thought it was a lynching, I really did. They hated me. By the second meeting, I had already procured a possible manager who was a recovering alcoholic. I had visited everyone that I should have visited regarding the application itself. By the second meeting, I got an approval. There were a series of 4 meetings, and each one was a battle. And when I finished, I actually got the approval by one vote of 40 people I got. It was a 1-vote majority. And when I was done, I said, oh, God, I'll never do that again. And then someone called me about a week later and said, I heard you got this guy through. I have a nursing home application. I got into a field, I was a consultant in the field of healthcare, but it was more than just healthcare. It was the total development of nursing homes. People would pay me to go into town and find an attorney, find a piece of ground, apply for the application, because you had to have you had to have the land already under control before you even applied for the application. I would do all this legwork for these people. And eventually, I was successful. I did 1 or 2 really successful applications, and like any other business, the nursing home community is very tight. Everyone knows each other. Oh yeah, oh my God, it's really amazing. Everyone, every service provider knows the owners. I mean, it's incestuous, it's crazy. But I got a reputation for doing good work, and I decided at one point, why not do this myself? So I was really an innocent, honest to God, and when I say things like this, it wasn't like, I knew how the system worked to a point. And I put together an application, and I was going up against one of the biggest operators in the country. It was Beverly Enterprises at the time. And I proposed an application for the city of Trenton. And the application took an old factory building and converted it into a nursing home. Well, there was a need in Trenton. There was a need in Mercer County, but the more significant part of the need was for poor people in the city. So everyone laughed when I put the application. They said, you're going up against Beverly, they're gonna blow you out of the water. Well, they didn't. They didn't, because my application took into consideration that it was a rehab of an existing building, would create 200 jobs in the area. It would serve a population both in terms of nursing home need and in terms of employment. By some miracle, I got through. I got the approvals. And then the nightmare began. Because I had put together an application for financing that was so complicated, and it worked, but it was complicated. And it relied on builder's profit. Everything I owned was in that deal. Everything that I owned, honest to God, was crazy. Uh, I had a federal, a loan from the federal government for a portion of the equity. And we did a dry, what's called a dry closing. And the dry closing, the whole deal is done, predicated on the fact that you get every 6 months every party. The federal government application, I had 30 days to close it. And I'm not lying when I tell you this. On the 30th day, at 4 o'clock, I got my last signature in Washington. The next day, the deal would have been dead, right? And not only dead, but I would have lost everything that I had. I was on the line. It was down to the last day. And I lived through it. That was the big end of my career. I was a partner in this facility. I mean, I made money on it, but I eventually sold off the controlling interest. And I did that for a few years, did 2 or 3 projects. We did a conversion of an old mansion in Lanco into a backyard. It was a beautiful project that never made it. You know, it was a gorgeous building. And it looked fantastic, and it just never made sense. I decided from that point, maybe the service area, maybe the service end of the business, because I knew everyone in the business at that point. And I bought a medical transport company. And I swear to God, it was 5 years of hell. 5 years, it was like going to the Jerry Springer show every day. You know, this is what you were dealing with. Hated it. My God. Finally, I sold it. I sold it to another company that absorbed my company. And I decided at that point, I'm taking off. I'm done. I need a break. You know, probably a midlife crisis. You know. But I did. I stayed home and I messed around with food. And I had a small carriage house in Delanco. That's where I met my wife. And I would cook. I'd sit around and I'd cook, and then I started making ice cream. And one of my old partners, Sam Kahn, I'll never forget, he used to say, Vince, let's open an ice cream business. Are you crazy? I'm not doing this. Come on, let's open an ice cream business. Sam passed away, right? And this is about a year and a half after I decided to take off. Well, of course, at some point you start running out of money. You know, I was having a ball. I said, I need something else. I got to invest in another business. I thought, Sam, ice cream. And I was already making ice cream at home, messing with it and giving it to friends of mine. And I called up, I had a connection with one of the distributors of a lot of the ice cream products. And I said, I'm looking for a business. So she said, let me see what I can find. The next day she called me up, and an ice cream business turned out in Trenton, in the old neighborhood where I grew up.
What was the name of that?
It was called, at the time, it was Petrucci's. Okay, it was part of a small chain. Actually, it was called Petrucci's, except a husband and wife team had they purchased it about a year earlier. It was in a rough section of Trenton. It's a rough area, right? And I said, I knew that the wife was terrified. So they bought this business. He worked for the state, and he figured his wife would run this side business. She hated it. And I bought the business from her. I knew a little bit about ice cream, but I sort of learned as I went along. And developed, over 10 years, I developed a really successful business in a really tough urban area. You know, but it made money. It did well. And I really got fond of the customers. I really liked the people. It was fun. You know? And eventually we moved to Mount Holly from Delanco. And I started another smaller operation in Mount Holly. It was a satellite for the Trenton facility. Everyone in Mount Holly wanted me to open an ice cream business because they had tried my ice cream in Trenton. They wanted us to do something here. The powers that be, we are, Mount Holly has a UEZ, Urban Enterprise Zone project. They approached me and said, listen, there's another building up the street. Why don't you buy it? We'll help you out. You know, we'll help you with the financing. Move.
That's great.
And I went from a small hole in the wall, God, it was like a broom closet in where we started. And we bought this building and expanded, we expanded the business to a point where, well, what helped was Channel 6 had called me up. Channel 6 actually called me and said, and I thought it was a prank. I really thought it was one of my friends pranking me. They said, we're doing a special on ice cream, and we'd like to interview you. I said, yeah, like that. I really thought it was one of my friends. Well, they came by, and they did this special. The night that they broadcast this special, we had a line down the block. It was crazy. like we were discovered,
Right.
right? Now, we already had a reputation. We had a reputation for quality, even in Trenton. The Newark Star Ledger did an article on us years ago that said, best small ice cream business in New Jersey, question mark, you know, which was great, because people were coming down from Newark
Right.
to try the ice cream. It was nuts. But it was fun. From that point, you know, we haven't looked back. Last year was probably the best year we ever had. It was crazy, but I'm getting ahead of myself. 3 years ago, I wanted a satellite. So we bought what was formerly Smiley's, and we opened up Vincent's. Here, I make everything, still today, I make everything in Mount Holly, and we ship everything up here. But it's the same product.
Do you still make all the ice cream yourself?
No, I don't. Right now, my neighbor, as a matter of fact, who is a trained chef, who her kids are grown up now, and she makes ice cream with me. She's doing probably about 80% of it at this point, using all my recipes.
I was just
Right.
gonna ask you.
And when we do develop recipes, we develop the recipe. You know, we know what we're doing. But it's worked out fantastic. I've been here 3 years. I mean, well, I'm not gonna get ahead of myself. There are issues that we're facing, you know, with the second location and developing a business around the demand, right? But I can't complain. It's been a great, I mean, this certainly beats medical transportation. It certainly beats being in the nursing home business. It's a happy business. We're happy when they get there, happy when they leave. You know, you have conversations.
Not so
become
much you,
friends.
Jeez.
Well, they're relieved when they leave.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they, yeah, absolutely. I know, and I'm sure both of you can attest to this, when you get your first thank you from someone, and I still have it, I have it framed, and it's right by my office desk, along with Giselle and Martha's pictures. But yeah, you know, I think with any business, you always kind of sometimes question, I know I do, you know, did you do everything? Was there something that you possibly missed? Because you're right, you have some families or some customers where, you know, they can't stop raving about you. And then you have some that are just very, you know, it's poker face. But then, you know, when you get that letter, or you get that card thanking you, I know for me, it's everything. It just sort of tells you, or I know tells me, to myself, that, you know what, you are where you're supposed to be.
It validates you.
Yes, and that's a wonderful example. Yes, it validates who you are, but more importantly, that the way that you're running your business is working for you.
And I think you touched on something, being in Trenton. You know, we're all involved in the Downtown Bordentown Association. Vince just was elected to sit on the board for next year. And we don't realize in this 1 square mile, this is safe, it's pretty, it's historic, it's clean. I mean, there's a lot, the template here, if you come into town and you're ethical and you're hardworking and you're open when you should be and your recidivism is because of who you are and your product and your service, this is a wonderful place to really make an attempt. Burlington is a pretty city. Their promenade alone, their sidewalks, I have sidewalk envy, you know what I mean? And they're beautiful, and the way that the city throws a lot of money in decorating and the beautiful hanging baskets and on. I can't put a person in there at night. I can't have an employee in there. They're not safe. And so we have a lot to be thankful for in this city because location, location, location. You know, I wonder, I have a question for you, because is it hard when you are burying some of your neighbors?
It is.
Yeah, that must be really hard.
It's difficult. It was extremely challenging for Stephanie, because Stephanie, when we met, at that time I was also working part-time. examiner's office in Essex County, Somerset, and Middlesex County. So I mean, I was constantly hustling because you know I think when you become driven, you enjoy working for people, but there's always that sense that you think that you can do it better. But with Stephanie, kind of just sort of circumvent back, she didn't really understand. And I would tell her, listen, here's what's gonna happen when we come into Bordentown, because you're right.
Yeah.
You know, we had no roots here whatsoever. We were originally from North Jersey. So to come into a town that it takes you an hour to get a cup of coffee because you're constantly stopping and talking with people, to me that was a blessing. And I said to Steph, I said, you know, the way that you just can't go outside with a big bell and a, you know, and a sign saying, you know, I'll inform you if you want. You have to get connected with the community. You know, there's no, you know, Super Sunday, you know, buy one slice of pizza, you know, or get another one free. So you have to saturate yourself, and that's what we did. We saturated ourselves into the community, and the community was nice enough to accept us and not go, you know what, we already have 2 other funeral homes in Bordentown. We really don't need you. Thank you. You know, thanks for, you know, coming by and go. So by us knowing people and getting saturated, becoming friends, it was very difficult for Stephanie. There was times where she would sit upstairs and she couldn't come down for the viewing because it just bothered her so much, because she's like, we just got done talking to these people, you know, or we just went out to dinner with these people, or we went to an event with these people. How did this happen? And there was times where she would get very angry. She would get angry at me. She would just get angry in general because this person died. And I said to her, you know, listen, you can't be angry. It's nobody's fault. You know, what you need to do is that you need to now be that person who's going to support your friends, not just while the viewing is going on, not just while the funeral is going on, but after everything is over with. And I give Stephanie a lot of credit, because she really sort of took that on, and it wasn't something that she originally signed up for. So and you mentioned Leon. I think in order for you to be happy with your business, you have to have that person who's going to support you, but then also too, going to be that person that's going to tell you, you know what, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong. And nobody else is going to tell you that you're wrong, because they want to be nice to you, but I'm going to give you the skinny. I'm going to tell the honest truth, and this is what you need to change. And I'm always, you know, I really am just at times mesmerized with the amount that she's taken on. But yes, it is. It's very difficult. There are Patty DeSantis, Jay Reed, Ellen Werman. You know, just those 2 women. When, like I said, when we came here, we didn't know anybody. They took us in and said, listen, we're going to introduce you to these people. We're going to do this. We're going to help you. We're going to let you know what Bordentown is about, and why Bordentown is such a wonderful place, but also too, like you said, it's very incestuous. But it's incestuous in a good way, because if you move out of here, people raise their families here, and they stay here, and they grow roots, and it's just shallow roots. It's deep roots. And I always find that fascinating. For 15 years, I find that so fascinating that you can come to a 1 square mile radius, and there are these specific families, the Bergs. I mean, they never left. They're as part of much part of the history as what the town is itself, the Hartmans.
Absolutely. You know what? My daughter, I have 2 daughters. My older daughter was born and raised here in town. You talk about bias. If you were not born and raised, you're not a Bordentown. To her, you're,
Right,
man, I'm a carpetbagger for God's
right.
sake.
Yeah.
That's how they consider me, but she was born and raised here, she has this, and yet, she's 51 years old, 52, whatever the hell she is. Her friends, the circle of people that she hangs around with are people she went to school with.
Yes.
You know, some of them, they went through grammar school and high school together, and they're still close. I mean, they're really close. We have something similar in Mount Holly. Jackie grew up in Mount Holly, right? So she went to schools in Mount Holly and, left when you were, I guess, in your 20s, right? And then came back 30-some years later. So here we are. But her relationship to the people is different. I mean, the people like me, I like them. It's not the same.
I will always own Anne Crenshaw Conley's house. I will
Yes,
always
yes,
say that.
yes.
Oh, you
Yeah,
remember her
right.
now? She
Oh,
was
right,
my
right.
first,
Yeah,
she
right.
was my
Those
5th
guys.
grade teacher. And I'm like, yeah, that's where I live.
Well,
It's funny that you say
And
that.
I always
because-
had Timmy's Luncheonette, where
Right.
the gallery was on the corner,
Yeah.
and that's still my building, but when most of goods is in there now,
But
people will come in.
It was
Oh,
nice.
this was Timmy's Luncheonette.
Yes.
it's also Coast and Rail Antiques.
When?
Oh, God, for about 6-7 years at least.
Before or
In the
after?
60s,
Oh, okay,
in the 60s and 70s.
okay.
Yeah, I still have furniture that I bought there.
Something, what were you saying?
I was just saying, no, you're 100% right. My building will always be Hartman Funeral Home. And it's funny, and I still have people that say, I'm familiar with Bordentown, but I'm not really familiar with you. Where are you located? And I'm like, well, it used to be, oh, it was Hartman's. Yes, it was Hartman's. Oh, I know exactly where you're at. You're right across the street from the church. You're right next to Consolidated Fire Department. Yes, yes. So and I wear that kind of like with a badge of honor. I feel very proud that people remember that building for that specific reason, that they remember the Hartmans and Mr. Hartman. There was a story that we were told, not George, not the son, but the father. There was a paper boy, and the paper boy used to come, and Mr. Hartman made sure that every time he came to collect for the paper, that he was out there and he gave him $5. And that's what he remembered. That was $5, and it was in the 80s when I guess people never got $5. But it was something that impacted his life, and he's a grown man today. He's like, I remember Mr. Hartman, he would be out there every single Friday when I would collect, and he always gave me a $5 bill. And I think that was one of the really biggest charms with Bordentown. We never knew that Bordentown existed. We didn't ever think that I would ever be in Bordentown. We got here, there was a funeral home that was in Hightstown at the time, which was owned by Mr. Crabiel. Mr. Crabiel owned 6 funeral homes. And I was looking for a place to purchase. And I was also looking for a place to work because I was sort of getting burnt out as well. And it just so happened that, somebody said, well, call him, he's got a place. So I went into New Brunswick, I sat down with him, and we discussed. He was looking for a manager and somebody to increase the business in Hightstown, because at that time Saul's was kind of the big funeral home. They owned Glacken and Saul. There was A.S. Cole in Cranberry, of course the locations that they had in Trenton and Hamilton. And I said, well, I'm going to be very honest with you, looking for a place. And he said, well, let's make a business agreement. And we did. And the agreement was that I would take a 50% pay cut. So I would manage the funeral home. I would do all of the embalmings for 4 out of the 6 locations. So back then, I would have probably been getting paid about $90,000, and I was getting paid $35,000, and I was on salary. But I knew that there was going to be an end result. And at the time, I had talked to Steph, and I said, I think, we're going to be moving down to Hightstown. And she's like, well, where's Hightstown? And I'm like, well, it's past Cranberry. And we both were like, we're going to like the Buda, New Jersey. We're going to be in Delaware. I'm like, oh, we got to drive all the way down to Cranberry. And what was interesting about Hightstown is that when we got down there to sort of take a look at the place was was very unkept. But Heightstown had these beautiful painted Lady Victorians, you know, so there was these gingerbread clapboards, different colors, and what I found very interesting is that it reminded me of Cape May, and I love Cape May. I love old houses. I used to work on them with my dad, and we thought, okay, well, maybe this is where we're supposed to be. I started working there within 6 months. We ended up purchasing a house 1 block over. It was one of those houses where the family just needed to leave. So they were originally selling it for $190,000. I couldn't afford $190,000. I could afford $160,000. That's what and the guy was like, okay, no problem. So we buy the house. Steph at the time was working in fragrance. She gets a job at Shiseido Cosmetics, which is right down the street, Princeton Heightstown Road. And we're like, okay, we made it. This is where we're supposed to be. We can sell the house. We can use that money, you know, for a down payment of the funeral home. I worked there for a little over 2 years. I increase his business. We start now bringing families from Clackamas and Saul. And now it's time to kind of go to the next step. And he says, well, I'm not going to sell it to you. You're making me too much money. But that was my fault because I shook his hand. So there was no contracts, there was nothing in writing. And I'm driving down Route 130, I'm having a very aggressive conversation.
The
People,
Italian side.
yes, people must have thought I was insane because I was the only one in the car. I'm screaming, I'm yelling at God, I'm like, it brought me all the way down here, what the heck is going on? And it just so happened that when I got back to the funeral home, there was a magazine that I would get from the New Jersey State Funeral Directors Association, because I'm a member, called The Forum. I opened it up, just like this, and there was a picture of Hartman Funeral Home. And it said, Hartman Funeral Home, business closed, building and property for sale only, contact Rick Lynch at Falconer and Bell at this number. So I didn't even want to tell Steph, but I called up, and Rick's like, well, why don't you come down and take a look at it? And I said, okay, well, where is it? And he's like, well, it's in Bordentown. And I said, well, where's Bordentown? And he said, it's past Miss Story's Diner. And I said, well, where's Miss Story's Diner? And he's like, just come on down and you'll find it. And we got down to the traffic light, and the interesting thing is the first thing I saw when I'm at the light over here is what? It's the adult bookstore. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
That's how I get through.
The adult bookstore, right.
Might as well.
Right. And I was like, okay, this is just a flop. This is, but I made the right hand turn, and which I'm sure that both of you saw. You come into this beautiful little city, with all of these trees, and there's the clock, and I pulled up, and it was at that time there was all bushes and everything, and I'm like, wow, this is really small, because it looks very small from the outside. Rick brings me inside. All the furniture was from 1970. It was all avocado. It looked like I was going, on the deck, the set of the Dick Van Dyke Show. But it was exactly everything that we were looking for 7 years I lived. So yeah, it's amazing. And just to kind of say one thing, Vince, it was interesting. We were told that there was a woman who used to work for St. Mary's, and she said we were adjusters. And she welcomed us, and she said, you'll never be Bordentonian. Your children will be Bordentonians, but you would never be Bordentonians. And she didn't understand. She didn't understand the name of the funeral home. She was like, "What do you mean home for funerals? What are you, a big corporation?" And they said, "No." I said, half of the people couldn't pronounce my last name anyway. It's like Peach, Potch, Poach, pecked.
So, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Hey, Doug,
On this side?
can you show her up?
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
And we used the city's name, Bordentown, because we wanted people to understand that we were here to stay. And the reason why it's home for funerals is because it's my home. And I want people to feel like that they're at home. This is where we live. This is where we're putting our roots down that we talked about earlier. But yeah, even though we were told that, we've never always thought it was very interesting when, you know, we finally had our first funeral. And there was people calling us, you know, going, oh, hey, we read your name in the obituaries, you know, good for you, you know, congratulations. Like, who would congratulate a funeral home for getting a call? But that's just, I don't know, that's just the charm of Bordentown.
Okay, cool. So we're a little past the hour, but one of the things we got very, very much for spending the time and having a great
It was
conversation.
fun.
Absolutely, really great. I don't know if you're available for any questions afterwards, but